lecture, we studied about what EDI is all about. And now we are going to learn about the complete EDI structure in terms of what exactly happens, what an analyst will do, or what a quality assurance analyst will do. And also we will do some part of the project to enable you that, okay, you can talk about and say that, yes, you are aware of what the project was, or you can say that, yes, you worked on the project, something like this. So that's the experience what I'm expecting out of this class. So as we see here, electronic transaction, these are all the different type of electronic transactions what we have. All are talking about the same role. They are talking about the same job description. So do not worry about that. Just apply for those positions. So as it says, electronic data interchange, which is also known as EDI, which is the short form of it, is a set of standards for structuring information to be electronically exchanged between and within businesses, organizations, government, and other groups. So what it does, the EDI is the area, EDI is the business processes, EDI have the business rules which allows to do the electronic transactions by using certain level of standards. And who governs that standard? HIPAA is the one who is governing that standard. So below that I have just put little history of it. If you want to read it, you can read it. If you want to just ignore it, you can ignore it. But this is just to give you a little more insight about the history of EDI, where it started, how it started. Rest all, it's up to you. So I won't go there because there are other important things which you need to know and you must know. So this is what EDI is. So this is kind of an entry point. That's why we call it as a gateway tool. EDI is a gateway tool which helps us explain how and what about the standards, about the rules, about the regulations. So for example, how means how you are going to do the transaction. So EDI will have the port, EDI will have the access entry point which will allow you for the businesses to interact with each other with the help of some standards. And what are the standards? We are going to learn. Here are the standards. So these are the different level of standards which we are going to talk about and understand. Now, let's take one at a time. Benefit enrollment and maintenance. What is that? Benefit enrollment and maintenance, as the name says, that 834 is the name of the transaction. If you can do mastery on these things, the job is yours, 100% assurance. And when I say mastery, means no one is asking you to know A to Z about it. Means if you are able to talk about this. If you are just able to talk about one of the file which is 837, conceptually you understand just one file, you will be able to take job in any of the file transactions. So that's why I say it's a very important chapter. Now let's look at benefit enrollment and maintenance. So as it says 834, that means if there is a request which needs to be submitted and there is some transaction which needs to be done between two bodies, and these two bodies could be anyone. Maybe your Walmart is communicating with your ACNA, who is a pair, or maybe inside the ACNA itself there are two departments. One department is the benefit department, another one is the claims department. Now benefit department has to send the data to the claims department to make sure claim is being processed correctly because the benefit is up to date. If that is the case, then also they can use the transaction level 834. So 834 means it will have the information to talk about what is the plan, what is the group, what is the suffix member have or subscriber have. For example, whether the benefit is for HMO, PPO, EPO, what level of benefit member have. So if Walmart has to send the electronic file to Cigna or ACNA, by providing all the details that, okay, this person have enrolled for XYZ benefit, which is your HMO benefit or PPO benefit, how he or she is going to do that? They will use the 834 file transaction. And that's what the transaction is all about, benefit enrollment. What the member is enrolled under, what kind of a benefits member have taken. We will do the project on 837 because that is the biggest and the largest transaction set. And that's the one I'm going to explain thoroughly so that you understand how to read the file, how to read the structure, how the data is structured. So I'll skip the 837 at this point of time and I will go to the next one. I'm skipping 837 and 835 because I'll come later. Before that I need to explain the others. Now then you have the premium billing, which is 811. What 811 does? 811 is the premium billing in the sense insurance company have some clients. You can say some clients. The clients are nothing but a members and the subscribers or the group. Group like Walmart, Verizon, anyone who have any employer, let me put it in that way, any employer. So every month or maybe quarterly, half-yearly, whatever mode of payment, whatever duration of the or the recurrence of the payment they have decided and agreed upon, when that time will come, they will send out the bill. And in the healthcare industry, how the bill works, so let's say there are two ways. Either the bill has to be generated for the individual account, which is the individual subscriber, consumer, or the bill has to be created for the broker, who is just an agent. He is not an employee, but he is just an agent and who have some people for whom he is paying the premium through, so the premium is going through broker to the insurance company. And the third one is your group insurance, which is your employer. So Walmart has to be billed for 500 people. So according to that, insurance company will generate the premium billing. That's what the premium amount is. So for that, they will use the transaction sheet as 811. See, these are just the numbers. These are numbers tied with the name of the transaction, but behind the scene they have the raw data in the form of text file or something. You will find it. But when someone is looking at the data, they are not looking at the text file. They are looking at into some application. So some application is just transforming these text files into the user interface. So text file may have the details that, okay, Walmart employee ID, John Smith have HMO. So these are in a text file which have no header. It's just a fixed delimited file, like, okay, position is fixed. But when this file gets imported as part of your system, the system will pull up the information of name field will be pulled up from the text file and it will display in the name field. So there is a user interface available. There is a software available which compiles the text file and display the data for the user. So 811 transaction will have that. All of these transactions are going to work in the same way. Only the communication is happening using these files, but then it gets transformed into the user interface where you can easily read it. Because every business user is not going to look at the text file. The text file only look when something is wrong or you are investigating something. Then you look at the text file. Now that is what your premium billing. The next one you have is the premium payment, which is 820. So as you see, when you send out an invoice, when you generate a bill, the responsible party is going to make the payment for that. Now the responsible party, when they are making the payment for that, they can make, if they are making the electronic payment, they are required to make the electronic payment using 820. So if they are using some software or something like that, automatically it will generate the 820 transaction set, which will have all the details that, okay, who is the responsible party, what is the amount they are paying it, what mode they are paying it, what bank detail, all those things will be there as part of your premium payment. So that is kind of a, you can consider that 811 and 820 go hand in hand. One is a request for the premium, another one is the response for the premium, and that is the payment for the premium. Then the next one you have is the eligibility roster. What is eligibility roster? Always remember the 270 and the 271 goes hand in hand, always. What it means? That if your physician office, the hospital wants to inquire what is member's benefit, there is a difference between 834 and 270, or make a note of it. 270 is the eligibility roster, which is an inquiry to find out what you are covered with. If the physician wants to know that whether you are covered for the MRI or not, how do they do that? They do it with the help of 270 transaction. Whereas 834 is not an inquiry. 834 is an information about that John Smith is enrolled under HMO plan, under the group coverage of Walmart. That's what your benefit and the enrollment is. So that's the difference. Many times people are getting confused with these two transactions because of the enrollment and the eligibility keyword. Again, I will explain. 834 is the benefit enrollment where you are, it's an information. It's not an inquiry. It's an information about subscriber benefits, that what member is covered under the product detail. Whereas your 270 is the eligibility inquiry, with what exactly you, whether you are covered or not. So it is an inquiry. And when the response comes back, which is 271, that is the response of that inquiry. So let's say if the physician office, someone, that administration is asking that whether the member is covered for your MRI or physical therapy or not. Or maybe the member is asking whether the responsible party, whether the subscriber have any physical therapy available or not. So this is an inquiry. So insurance company may respond back with the help of 271. That is the transaction. What we see here is the 271. They may say that yes. They may come back and say that yes, they have the out of 5, they have already used 3, so they just have 2 more physical therapy visits left. So that information the physician office have got as part of your 271 transaction. So again, this is the request and the response. You will find jobs about EDI. Again, you need to know this. If you have any questions, I would ask you to feel free to reach out to me and ask me as many questions you want. But again, it's very important for you to know all this and understand it conceptually. Do not try to just go with the definition, bookish definition. Try to understand it so that you don't mess up with the numbers. Then you have the claim status inquiry and response. What do we mean by claim status? Let me just quickly catch up with the question. Yes, Nilesh, I will wait for your question. So in the meanwhile, he is writing up the question. Let's move on to the next one, which is 276 and 277. 276 is the claim status inquiry and 277 is the response of that. Now what exactly it means? It means if the physician office has submitted the claim and they are awaiting response of the claim status, that whether the claim is paid, it's been 15 days, they have no response, nothing like that, then what they do? They generate the 276 transaction. When I say they generate, they don't even know, the person who is working on the physician office, that behind the scene this is something what is getting generated, because they are looking at the user interface. They just click the button and say that okay, claim status inquiry, for example, there is a screen. Let's put it in this way. This is a small application what they are using it, and there is a small button what they are using. So that processor from the office have just clicked this button to find out and then enter the claim ID for which he or she wants to inquire about the status, where exactly the claim is stuck. Now behind the scene, that system is going to generate the transaction set, which is 276 for this. And from the insurance company side, again, there is a support sitting there on the payer side. Now the support person also doesn't know So this is your support. Okay. So this person hits the button, it gets come over here. Again, this is happening behind the scenes. So this is generating your 276. Whereas when this person gets the request, what happens? This person also doesn't know that some information which has come, it has come in the form of 276. Because again, here they are using the application which is transforming this 276 in this form. When the system, see, not necessarily someone is going to respond back and manually going to respond it. System have all the information available that what is the status of this claim. So what system will do, if system can find the information automatically, it will just automatically respond back with the help of 277. So they will just respond back with the help of system. So then the response automatically gets generated in the form of 277 transaction set. Okay. Now there is a question. It says for some visit, physician asks to call back after 2 weeks. The physician asks to call after 2 weeks because there could be, yes, this could be an example of 271, or this could be just an example of, yeah, you can say that authorization request. So physician authorization request takes time because there is a medical review team who is sitting over there. So for not all the services, but there are some services for which the medical review team will look into it and then they will provide the authorization. So sometimes the 2 weeks window is that broader area, not necessarily that you are going to just get it right away. It's a fixed time. If they get that approval, this is because the ultrasound, any expensive services always require some kind of an authorization to make sure the insurance company is able to keep track of all the expensive services, and that helps a lot for the future forecasting when they are designing any new benefit plan for any new group. So it could be just a request for, it could be just part of the authorization as well. So considering that, they may ask you to wait for 2 weeks, but usually if it comes before that, they may say that, okay, now you have received it and you can go for the services. They will give you the authorization ID or pre-certification ID. When you go for that ultrasound service, you are going to just give that ID when you take up an appointment. If you don't have it, you may connect your radiology staff with your physician office so that they can get the otherwise, without that approval, your radiology services cannot be performed unless you pay out of your pocket. So when you're taking an appointment and they will ask you that do you have the authorization ID or pre-certification ID? If you say no, then you say that are you going to pay out of, you can say that no, my physician office have received it, it's just I don't have it. So either they will say that, okay, give us your physician office, we will call up, or they will say that why not you call them and take that ID and then give it to us so that we can put it in the file and we can submit the claim. So when the radiology will submit the claim, they will use that referral authorization ID to submit the claim, because now they know this claim have this authorization ID. So if you go back to the 2-3 classes back, if you recall, when I was teaching the claim processing, there was one mode where the referral was getting used. Similarly, the authorization also gets used. So yeah, so that is about 276 and 277. Then we have the patient information as 275. What is 275 transaction? 275 and 278, if you read it, it is going to confuse you a little bit, but don't get confused. 275 is nothing but it's just a patient information. What it means? Patient information could be patient demographic. Let's say the lab has to submit the claim and they want physician office to provide some information about patient. So lab may request that information from the physician office in the form of 270, or maybe most of the time they have a real-time access. So their application is communicating with the physician application. So they may get the 275 information. Now the 278 transaction healthcare service review. Let's say the patient is in the hospital setting, one department, another department communicating with each other. Hospital requesting some information from the physician office. So these are all the information, or hospital needs to submit something to the insurance company before they can provide the services to the patient. So if you recall, whenever someone gets into the hospital setting, the administrative person will come, fill out the form and do all the necessary thing, and then he will submit the information in the system. So when the physician gives the first thought, then again all that information gets submitted to the system, and automatically it gets submitted to your insurance company. So even though you know or not, your insurance company is fully aware of what services you are taking. And it's not like that it is so real time that immediately they are just going to update the insurance company. It doesn't work like that. What happens, if they think that there are some services, by practice they come to know, they learn that okay, over the time that they need to, what kind of a services will require some level of approval from the insurance company. So in those cases only they get the approval first before they provide the services. Not for every service they just go back and provide the services to them. So these are most of the transactions what you can see in the healthcare EDI side. Then we have 837 and 835, which is the very important part of the EDI. So we have claims, and there is a abbreviation, or I can say the alternate term which is very commonly used in the industry is encounters. Member services are considered encounters. Member getting services from the provider. So in that setting, the services which member have taken are considered an encounter. That's the term. Now when we talk about encounter, always remember, this is the claim, this is the core data which physician is submitting to get it reimbursed. So what is this 837 is? 837 is all about claims. It will have the information that what was the procedure code, why patient visited the physician, what treatment was given, for how many services, the number of lines. For each line, what is the diagnosis code which was submitted, what kind of a treatment was given to the patient, what is the ICD codes, all these informations will be there. On top of that, you will have the provider information, you will have the member information, you will have the group information that okay, if it is a group policy, then you have to have a group information. It will also have that if it was the hospital detail, if it was the provider detail. In that setting also, if you have additional providers, for example, there is something called attending physician and there is something called referring physician. So your referring physician could be different and your attending physician could be different. Referring is the person, the physician who is referring the patient to another physician. Attending is that physician who is attending the patient, who is looking at the patient and trying to see what the symptoms are and providing the treatment to that. So this has billing physician, attending physician, ordering physician. If you have a claim which is for the durable medical equipment, like there are many people who uses some medical equipment like oxygen and all these things. In that case, the claim gets submitted as a DME. That term is DME, durable medical equipment. In those cases, your physician who is ordering the equipment becomes ordering physician. So same physician plays a different role and call out with a different name depending upon the situation and the type of service they are providing to the subscriber, they are providing to the patient. So all this information we are getting submitted, all these things are getting submitted as part of your 837 file. Now as I said, your physician file would be different as compared to your hospital file. What it means? Your 837 have a different version. Version in the sense I'm saying different type of form altogether. So if the physician has to submit the claim. He will or she will submit the claim as part of 837P. That means it's a 837 claim form for patient. On the other hand, if the physician is submitting the claim, if the hospital is submitting the claim, then the hospital is going to submit the claim as part of your 837I. I is the 837 institutional. And if there is a dental claim, then it will be submitted as part of 837D. Now, what information you need to submit as part of 837P is different. Not 100% different, but there is a difference. It is different than your 837I, which is your institutional. And then similarly, 837D is different because that is for the dental. So obviously for dental, you are just going to talk about that tooth and what type of tooth it is, what kind of a services you have taken. So dental is separate. So these are the three type of files. Now, when you are submitting the claim for professional claims, what form you fill out? You fill out a form which is called as CMS 1500. This is the form type which you will fill out. I will teach you guys how to translate the CMS 1500 file to make sure that you understand this. I will pull up the content for you guys. So maybe next class or so I will see if I can teach you the CMS 1500 to make sure that you understand how to read that file, what information is required, what to put where. You are not necessarily going to submit the claim because that's not your job. So no one expects you to know how to fill out the form. But from the analyst side, if you look at, you need to know the breakdown, you need to understand the architecture, you need to understand the flow of this form to better, I would say, to do it better analysis. So for that reason, yes, you do know that. And that I will teach you. Then there is another form. This is for the professional. 837P gets source is CMS 1500. Then you have the 837, and some of you who are coming from the billing and the coding background, you already know that these are the forms which are available. So the another one is which gets submitted more from the institutional side. It is UB04. Industry-wide, still, if you are working on as a business analyst, you may hear the term as Uniform Billing UB92, which was the old version. Still, industry has changed to UB04, but still, they still call out as a UB92. For some reason, UB04 never came up to the mouse, and it never catches the audience to say that, okay, they start calling it as UB04. Even though they are using the form UB04, but still they call out as a UB92. And UB stands for Uniform Billing. So these are the forms which will be submitted. So if CMS 1500 gets filled out, it will translate to the transaction 837P. If the form being submitted as a UB04, it will translate that form content into 837I. So this is you need to know, which I will explain. Now this we have talked about the 837 claims. So now the claim is being submitted. When the claim being submitted electronically, now it's time for the payment. So now we are talking about this transaction, payment. When we talk about payment, always remember, anyone who is eligible and signed off to get the payment detail electronically can only get the 835. Various type you will hear the question that can everyone receive, everyone is able to receive the 835? Can every provider, let me put it in this way, every provider eligible to receive 835? Answer is yes. considering if the provider has signed up with the insurance company for the 835 recipient. If the provider is the 835 recipient and have a contract with the insurance company, then they can receive the 835. So now the 835 is the response of 837. I always try to connect those two transactions like 837 and 835, 811 and 820 so that it gets to your mouth, and whenever you know only one, you are able to relate the other one. For example, if you know 837 and you are getting lost that okay, what was the other number which is getting used for the, I don't know, it was 820, 811. No, always try to use it. 837, 835, 811, 820, 270, 271, 276, 277, 278. Try to use it in a manner so that you know that which are the two transactions which are correlated and which are the ones which are individual, so that it's easy for you to remember those transactions and you are able to answer that. So it's kind of a request and the response. So similarly for 837 and 835, claims and payment. That's how it is. 811, 820, billing and payment. 270, 271, it is in eligibility inquiry and the response. 276, 277, claim status, inquiry and response. Like that, you try to relate that so that you remember all these things. So these are all the transactions what you have on the healthcare side and very demanding in the payer world. As long as you have good information about that and you understand how to compile this data, you are in good shape as long as you are able to talk about it. Let's move on. Now this is your HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and the Accountability Act, is the federal regulation that requires the use of certain actual transactions to report and inquire about electronic healthcare transactions. Current version, no longer the current version. The slide needs to be updated. It's no longer the current version. The current version is 5010. The older version was 4010. That is the HIPAA transaction. This was a very big mandate which got effective in 2012. So 1/1/2012, write a date of it. Okay, it was 1/1 when the transaction was mandated. Means whoever in the industry is part of the healthcare and doing electronic transaction, they must be in compliant with HIPAA 5010 mandate. Again, I am explaining. This date is very important for you because you are going to write something in your profile. And if you are not able to remember this date, you cannot write 5010. You worked on the 5010 implementation in 2012. You cannot do that. So you need to make sure, because if you are showing as an experienced business analyst or quality assurance analyst in healthcare, you must remember this date. 1/1/2012 was the mandate when that everyone from the industry has to be in compliance with the 5010. Now, we have current version is replaced by 5010, which is our current version what we are using right now. 5010 applies to all healthcare transactions. Now, what are the transactions set over here? Claims, eligibility. Then we have the claim status, request and response. So all the transactions which we have learned over here, all the transactions comes under the umbrella of 5010 mandate. That means whatever has changed, you need to make sure that you are able to be in compliance with that. So this is your clearinghouse. This is your 5010 application. Now 5010 supports National Provider Identifier, which is NPI, and new ICD-10 codes. Now these are the two mandates it's talking about. Number one mandate is this and the another one is this. Now this mandate got effective back in 2008. This is in 2008. And this one was supposed to be effective in 1/1/2013. But again it got pushed off to 2014, and now again it got pushed off to 2015. Now, what is the new date? New date is October 1st. Okay, please ignore my writing. I'm so bad at this. October 1st. This is 2015. This is ICD timeline we are talking about. Again, this date you need to remember. October 1st, 2015, you need to remember. Now, what is the mandate? What anyone would have done, that is the project what we are going to do. And based on that, you are going to write some requirements if you are a business analyst. If you are going to write the test cases, if you are the quality assurance analyst. So depending upon what other training program you have taken, you need to go back and write the requirement. But before that, I will explain end to end what have happened as part of the implementation. Now, let's talk about it. So, National Provider Identifier, this was the unique ID which was issued by the Medicare, by CMS to the providers. For this is kind of a, you can think this is the National Provider Identifier. That means if you need to identify the provider and find out the practice, how the provider practices with the help of NPI, you can find out. Similarly, if you need to pull the history of the member, how you do that? With the SSN. Similarly, provider will have this NPI. By using that, you can completely get the history of the practice, of that provider practice. So, that is what is your NPI. Let's talk about NPI mandate, what it was. When the NPI got mandated in 2008, the industry was given some options in terms of, the reason why I am explaining you is, any case if someone is writing down more than prior to 2008 that you have worked in the healthcare industry, this was a very big mandate again, NPI, you should know all these things. See, whether you know about the internal project or not, but you must know about the NPI and any mandate which are federal mandate or in any kind of a mandate, at least you should know about, which impacted the industry very badly. Now, let's talk about what was that mandate. The mandate says that anytime physician is submitting the claim electronically, they must have the NPI available. So they gave some options, like in that option, there were 3 or 4 options they gave. Out of that option, they must have the NPI available. So this is must. But what happened? This is the new format which got effective 2012. I will show you the challenge what was there, and this is the older version, and this was there up to 2012. This was effective up to 2011 December. This is 2008. In this file version, NPI become mandatory field, but here the NPI was the optional field. So what industry did, they put some logic in place to make sure whoever is submitting the claim after 2008, all the claims have the NPI available till 2012. But the moment they implemented 2012 5010, automatically they had to remove that custom logic from their system side, and because this becomes mandatory field over here. Here there was nothing like that, it was not mandatory. Here it is mandatory. So now they know that, okay, if the provider is not submitting that NPI, the claim is going to be upfront rejection. And this is what the NPI was all about. Let's move. Any questions so far from the NPI side? No question, let's move on. Now first, let's look at that federal regulation and what is why did we need that kind of an implementation, moving from 4010 to 5010? So it was the federal regulatory compliance. The current system, which was the 4010, no longer the current system. The old standard, which is the 4010 standard, was 6 years old standard. And enhancements